Hello, my name is Eleni Talis, and I will be presenting my midterm project where I worked with a movie data set, and my objective was to see what streaming service is worth your screen time. So let's get started with the sampling. I took a sample of 120 movies from the 1,370 provided in the data set. I did that by my birth month, which is July, and that month was assigned simple random sampling. And I got my sample of 120 movies by using an Excel function called random in between, as seen on my screen. And I did the minimum and maximum values of my data set. And I picked the first 120 numbers for my data set as shown in the random number column. And I did that by dragging my mouse to get 120 movies and any repeating or non-unique numbers I kept doing the Excel function to get all 120 unique. But yes. So my criteria on this project was based on three things that I thought were essential to what makes a streaming service not only worth your screen time, but also worth your money. The first one is finding out the most prevalent or most popular streaming service in North America. The second criteria is a runtime of 120 movies or 120 minutes or less. From a personal perspective, I believe that this is a golden spot for movies, as I find from personal experience that any movie longer than that can be quite tiring or fatiguing. Um, and the last criteria I had is the best score or average of scores on IMDb. This is a known website for its movie rankings and critiques coming from a reputable platform. So let's get started with criteria one. So what you see on my screen right here is a pie chart displaying the distribution of different continents using streaming services along with its marginal table as seen here. Looking at this data, we can see that North America carries a heavy percentage of the count as shown as 62%, followed by Europe's 23%, and then very far off Asia with 6%. But this distribution makes sense because North America has the best entertainment industry in the world, and it makes sense why our streaming services have more variety to them as we offer the best movies um, in the world. But so I wanted to break this down even further. This didn't give me a definite answer of what streaming service is alone best in North America. And so I researched um streaming services with the most users. So Netflix came off as the number one with having 247 million users, followed by Prime Video. But I wanted to test this with my own data. And so this led me to creating a relative frequency chart of streaming services across North America. And from my data sample, Prime Video had the highest frequency percentage of 52%, followed by Netflix's 18% and Disney Plus with 12%. And so this graph shows not only as Prime Video as the top contender for the most prevalent streaming service, but also I do want to point out this graph looks slightly skewed to the left as well. But this makes the winner of criteria one to be Prime Video. So that is for criteria one. Now for criteria two, which is a runtime for under or equal to 120 minutes, I was thinking through this project and trying to see um what way I could best get this answer. And I thought the most sound way was to get the average of the movie's runtime on each streaming service. And I wanted to use the average because I knew that streaming services carry a variety of films like documentaries, shows, short films, and I figured to just find the average because we are accounting for everything that each streaming service offers. So this led me to creating box plots of each streaming service and I also calculated the means for each one as well because I wanted to get a visual representation of the differences in runtime, but also to apply a number that is substantial. But as you can see, all the means are very significantly under 120 minutes. And so just from this data alone, I felt like I wasn't giving the most visual um, answer for the top contender for criteria two. So I went an alternate route of me figuring out this data, and this led me to creating histogram plots for each streaming service, and I added the relative frequencies for classes under 120 minutes, as seen on all the graphs. And so each class under 120 minutes was added and calculated. So for Netflix, when I added all the classes relative frequency under 120, I got 0.76. Hulu had 0.743, Prime Video had 0.775, and Disney Plus with 0.817. And keep in mind, I do want to point out the shapes of the histogram is interesting, and I think it leads to why the data is the way it is. But um, we can see that on Netflix histogram, it's skewed to the right, or just or J-shaped. Prime Video has a almost symmetric or unimodal mode shape, and even Hulu has a slight skew to the right as well. But like I said, Disney Plus, or sorry, Prime Video had the highest relative frequency of 0.942, and it is the winner of criteria 2. So that is 2-0 for Prime Video. This is the last criteria. Um, so for the last criteria, I wanted to see which streaming service had the best average score on IMDb, a public platform known for its movie ratings and reviews. I thought the best way to visually see that was through a mean bars plot with arrow bars. To lay it all out, I took each streaming service and their measures of dispersion, like average, standard deviation, and their 5 number summaries. And so these are included on the screen. Keep in mind that in my data set, the count of each streaming service is very disproportionate. As you can see, Netflix and Hulu had the most movies in the count with 63 each, and this number compared to Disney's 11 and even multiple streaming services only having a count of 8. Um, it could take account into why their standard deviations are higher due to the fact that there is more variance in the data. But when I graphed my data, this is what it came out to. There is similarities between each of them, but ultimately Prime Video does lead with the highest average of 6.52. Each arrow bar was calculated to be each streaming service's standard error, which was calculated by dividing the streaming service's standard deviation by the square root of the number of movies, which was 120. So the smaller the standard error is, the better, as standard error measures the amount of discrepancy that can be expected in a sample estimated compared to the true value in the population. So with that being said, Prime Video had the lowest standard error, which is good considering the rest of the data having standard errors that are close to 2 to 3 times that number. But Prime Video is 3-0, and it is the winner of criteria number 3. So with that being said, it is deemed the best streaming service from my data set. I do want to point out the fact that from my sample, it had the most movies in North America. As we can see, it had almost half the movies in North America, in my data set alone, and so that equates to it was being the most prevalent. It had the highest frequency of 0.942 for movies under 120 minutes, and that was done through calculating all of the classes under 120 minutes, adding them all together, and seeing what from each streaming service who had the highest relative frequency. And Prime Video had the highest average ratings on IM IMDb with the score of 6.52. But I hope you enjoyed this presentation and thank you.